Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. As ever, all you see here is for sale. References, names, and when available, prices in the description below. Any questions, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Purchase, pricing, buy, trade, or sell. We are always looking to build inventory. We'll buy one watch or an entire collection. We wire cash, we pay fast, no upper limit on value paid. Once again, if you're looking to trade or sell a watch, reach out to me directly, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Let's go straight for the clickbait. I promised you a gem-studded Rolex Sub, and here it is. One of the most under the radar launches of Baselworld 2018. This is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Submariner Date. It is the 116659 SABR, an extraordinary gem-studded white gold 40mm dive watch. This timepiece is the best of Rolex handcraft because, frankly, it is the last of Rolex handcraft. Almost everything Rolex does is operated by a machine. Assembly, fine-tuning, finishing, but the gem setting, that is still done manually the old-fashioned way. And this watch features gem-paved lugs and crown guards. Note the baguette sapphires set into the bezel. You can see an invisible setting is used as there's only the inner and outer track. You can see it is still a 120-click unidirectional rotating dive bezel, the timepiece with an extravagant blue sunburst dial, diamonds interspersed within the sapphires, and take note, although perhaps a little bit fatuous for divers, we do have the first 15 minutes of the dive calibrated in a brighter and lighter tone of sapphire blue than the rest of the scale. The watch with caliber 3135 is still a diver. It still features all of the hallmarks of the Submariner Date, including the glide lock system, 20mm of incremental adjustment in the clasp, 2mm increments, white gold bracelet. Truthfully, this is gray gold. Gray gold is a Rolex proprietary alloy. They make their own gold. They have their own foundry. So if it is scratched, there is nothing but more white metal underneath. Gray gold is 18-karat white gold that needs never be replated. The dial has been cleaned up. Note there is no depth rating on the dial. The watch is technically identical to a standard Sub, it's just a lot cleaner. And again, inside 48-hour power reserve, chronometer certified, anti-magnetic, and shock tolerant. Let's see it on my wrist. My wrist, some of you might know by now, is 16 centimeters in circumference, and it's a substantial watch. The Supercase Subs do look bigger on the wrist. This looks like a 42. It measures 40, and make no mistake, all in white gold with a solid case back and solid links, solid milled clasp. It's a hefty piece. A full bracelet white gold Rolex feels like a platinum watch from any other brand. Let's do a quick lume shot, because it is, after all, a diver. Here you are, blue by day, blue by night, Rolex Chromolite Blue Lume. Did I mention they also make their own lume? Jumping back to the land of the living, let's take a quick look at another sports watch that I consider to be the best single watch you can add to your collection. Whether you're looking for just one fine watch or trying to round out a collection that has everything, I believe that the 2002 launched GirardPerregaux Master Compressor Memobox is the best all-arounder you can buy. Now, there's a lot to love here. 41.5mm in stainless steel. This is a 100-meter diver with a Polaris-like internal rotating bidirectional bezel. Now, because it's operated by a crown, it serves as a dive bezel because it cannot be accidentally displaced. Plenty of lume. Note that the font used for the numerals as well as the indices is identical to that used on the Polaris 68. It is also an alarm, and it's a compressor crown system, so one half turn white you're tight, one half turn red you're dead. You can lock and unlock the crowns using that system. Now I will set the alarm. Do my best to manually set this one off. Memobox caliber 918, automatic winding with alarm and a 45-hour power reserve, a JLC manufacturer caliber, inside a case that features a solid rose gold medallion on the reverse to let you know this watch has been through the Master 1000 Hours control. A 1,000-hour test rather than the bare 2 weeks of the Swiss COSC. It also includes shock resistance, power reserve, winding efficiency, and of course chronometry. It is a full test that back in 1992 represented one of the first in-house tests that would exceed the COSC in both chronometry and broader parameters, and it is a fully cased-up watch test. Very few of these were made with a full bracelet, and you can see the bracelet is a delightful piece. There is an internal quick release that you can see on both sides, much like Rolex Easy Link. It is a fold-out 2.5 millimeter adjustment. For 5 millimeters total, you get 2.5 on each side. As you can see, a combination of satin and polished links, quite solid in the hand, and a double deployant clasp with 4 triggers to ensure absolute security when closed. Of course, the watch is a sports watch, and because we did a lume shot for the Rolex, we're doing a lume shot for the Master Compressor Memobox. There you are right there. An easy watch to read day or night, supremely practical with water resistance, the durability of steel, automatic winding, plenty of lume, the alarm, and the internal rotating bezel for timing. If you're looking for just one great watch from one great brand, this should be at the top of your list. Now let's consider the finer things in life and jump to a different Richemont Group brand, this one true haut de gamme, launched in 2016 in this 37mm rose gold case. This is the Vacheron Constantin Harmony Dual Time. The Harmony series of tonneau case watches came out in 2015, but they were large. This 37mm midsize feels like the perfect size for just about any wrist. First, let me throw it on my wrist so you get a better sense. This is a large watch, make no mistake. On the wrist, it wears more like a 40 because of the particular shape of the case. It has considerably more grace than the larger models, as it doesn't seem blockish or overwrought. It's a perfect size. I would consider it a unisex option, and as you can see, it is delightfully detailed. You have a dual time dial, and I'm able to change the location of that local pair style hand, but then if I pull the crown out all the way, I can set everything in sync, and you can see there is an AM, PM, day, night distinction for that second time zone. Silver matte opaline dial, you have sunken registers with concentric patterns for the AM, PM, as well as the second time zone, and then when you turn it over, you can see it is a Vacheron Constantin manufacturer caliber based on the 2400 series. Automatic winding, 40-hour power reserve. Note the guilloche cut on the 22-karat mass. It is beautifully executed, as you would expect in the tradition of the Poinçon de Genève, as every example of this model line was built past the midpoint of 2012. You can see that the Geneva hallmark is blazoned on both the movement and the case, as it is now a fully cased up watch standard. It applies to the entire watch, not just the movement. How about something a little bit different? Japanese domestic market. This is the Grand Seiko Cradler Spring Drive Big Date Hand Wound GCLP 993, 38 millimeters in steel. It's only 10 millimeters thick as I measure it, and then 43 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip. It is a very fetching watch. White lacquered dial, big date, power reserve indicator, and gorgeous individually hand-finished applique dart style indices with matching hands at center. Throw the watch on the wrist and it is super slim, short across the wrist, the epitome of elegance, grace, and rarity, as you're unlikely to ever encounter one of these outside the Japanese domestic market. In the West, we think of Cradler as super high-end watches available in only a few dozen examples per year, but in Japan, Cradler is the Grand Seiko upmarket brand. There are examples that are more mass-produced than, for example, these micro-artist studio pieces, but they're still elegant, graceful, and premium in their specification, and that's what this watch is. It is essentially the equivalent of something like a Rolex in Western markets. Now you can see when you turn it over, it has a handsomely decorated 7R87 spring drive movement, manual wind here, fired blued screws. You have stripes across the bridges. The finishing on this model is done mostly mechanically, but as with Audemars Piguet, that's no bad thing, as it's quite attractive when done well. 48-hour manual wind power reserve, and it's spring drive, so it's going to be accurate to 15 seconds per month, and you have a power reserve indicator on the dial side that's wonderfully animated. With the short power reserve of 48 hours, the power reserve indicator moves quickly when you wind the watch, making for a lovely piece of theater. And of course, we have that double-digit date complication. Note that a champagne coloration has been used for the date discs so that it will stand out better against the dial. And there is a quick set system that makes it an absolute ball to play with. This is the GCLP 993 from Cradler. Full clasp, And now we're jumping into the realm of true sports watches. The Vacheron Constantin Overseas launched in 1996, but it wasn't until 1999 that a chronograph model arrived and quickly became the favorite of collectors. Generation 1 Overseas watches are uncommon, and because the chronograph only arrived in 99 and the series ended in 2003, there aren't a whole lot of them in circulation. If you don't like big watches, this is for you, as the Gen 1 chronograph was 40 millimeters, and that's just about perfect. The Gen 1 chronometer was 37. That's too small for some. The Gen 2 chronograph was 42. That's too big for some. This is just right, and it has some of the features that make the Gen 1 unique, starting with this rarely seen military dial, black with lovely white transferred Arabic numerals and a symmetrical dial. I'll show you the Generation 2 here. You can see how the Generation 2 features a sort of big eye layout where the minute register is made larger. Here you can see that it is completely symmetrical from side to side. You'll also note that the date discs here are a contrasting but somewhat smaller profile. Here, they're contrasting, but note that the apertures are better defined and larger on the earlier watch. You can also see that the timepiece is gracefully hand-finished, and I believe that in terms of the time invested and the detail rendered, the first generation bracelet is the most beautifully made of the 3 generations. Now, you can also see that it is a little bit over-engineered, as there is both a clamshell system and then a little locking lever, so you need to undo both of them to open the clasp. Now you can see the reverse side, the image of the Italian naval training vessel Amerigo Vespucci. That has been a constant in the Overseas line. These Generation 1 watches are thinner than the Generation 2 watches, and you can see on my wrist 16 centimeters. This really is the perfect size. The Gen 2s wear well even on the bracelet because the bracelet on those will pull straight down, but the Gen 3s can be problematic. If you have a smaller wrist like mine, you want to go Gen 1 or Gen 2 full bracelet model, unless you plan to wear it on a strap. The best bracelets are the Gen 1 and the Gen 2 for fit. You can also see it is a thin watch, and it's identically powered relative to the Generation 2. The Generation 2 and the Generation 1 both feature the Frédéric Piguet 1185 automatic winding, vertical clutch, column wheel, hand-finished, 40-hour power reserve. Very, very well suited to this style of watch. Now with the Generation 2, you also gain a soft iron inner cage around the movement to give it greater anti-magnetism. Both of these watches are 150 meters water resistant, and we may as well do a side-by-side loom shot here. Loom shot side by side. I prefer the military dial, to be perfectly honest. I think it's just a little bit brighter, and I also think it's a lot more distinctive. If you want to compare the thickness of the 2 generations, to start right there, you can see that the 2 pieces have similar but not identical thickness, with the lack of the soft iron inner cage making the first generation watch a little bit slimmer. You can also see that the timepieces are somewhat smaller when viewed from the front. This one does have a significantly larger footprint. That said, this is also one of the best versions of the 2nd generation Overseas chrono. It is the blue on blue, blue strap, blue dial, lacquered blue dial. It's wonderful, glossy, gleaming, bottomless, and a little bit like blue enamel. You can see just how handsomely mirrored it is. The big eye minute register does make it easier to read the minutes, so it is functional. You can throw this watch on a rubber strap and it will wear well in the pool, in the ocean. Highly anti-magnetic, and it sits almost as low on the wrist because its case back is cupped or domed, so it sits almost as low on the wrist as the 1st generation watch. Both 1st and 2nd generation watches feature screws that hold bars that retain the strap to the case. This could be your dress watch, it could be your sports watch. No Vacheron is ever going to look out of place in formal attire, but it is very much a sports watch, and because there's no plinth or base underneath the bezel on the Generations 1 and 2, they just look a little bit thinner and trimmer to the eye than the Generation 3 watch. Let's talk about a little old watchmaker from Schaffhausen, Switzerland. Okay, maybe they're not old, as the modern iteration of H. Moser and C was created in 2005, but they are small, making about 1,500 watches a year, of which this right here is a 20-piece limited edition in white gold. This is the 20-piece 40 1.8 millimeter H. Moser & C Endeavour Tourbillon Concept Violet. It features a violet fume dial with Moser's signature concept aesthetic, stripped down to the absolute minimum, no printing, no indices, no marks, just two hands and a tourbillon. It also has their fume fade from violet at the center to almost black at the edge. Now the tourbillon is an exceptional piece. Moser making the small pieces of the movement, the hard parts that most companies, even most manufacturers, are going to buy. They make their own escapement, they make their own balance, they make their own hairspring, and here they have provided two such hairsprings, two flat hairsprings, horizontally opposed 180 degrees out of phase with each other. So when one is in a position such that it will gain time relative to gravity, the other is in the exact opposite position and will slow it down. That is how this watch recovers the original intent of the tourbillon, which was chronometry. With the opposed hairsprings, the tourbillon, regardless of its position, will always run true. Now it's also a flying tourbillon. As you can see, there is no upper bridge, and the tourbillon structure is handsomely hand finished. So you have a complete open, unobstructed view of the mechanism that gives this watch so much charm. The case is beautifully made. Moser cases are truly special, as they first machine the cases and then hand finish them. That's how these deeply scalloped profiles are achieved. And you can also see the bezel is concave all the way around, but broader at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock, with a lovely curvature to the case. And if you look, the case back crystal is also curved to better conform to the wrist. Caliber 804, automatic winding with a flying tourbillon that sits on ceramic bearings at its base. There's a pawl-based winding system, bidirectional, and a 3-day power reserve. You can also see several different types of finish, and the barrel arbor is fixed in a golden chaton held by polished screws. The watch also includes a full white gold deployant clasp, a rare feature on Moser watches that is not universally included. On my 16-centimeter circumference wrist, you can see the watch is nice and flat. It is a great dress watch, suitable for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. It's also low enough that it'll fit easily underneath a cuff. And with a combination of the white metal and the colorful dial, you can absolutely dress this down and wear it with casual attire. This watch is always at home, just about everywhere except the water. Take a trip to the other side of Schaffhausen. After H. Moser & C, we talk about the other manufacturer in the German-speaking town of Schaffhausen in the northeast of Switzerland. We'll start with this watch right here. This is the IWC Pilot's Watch UTC Spitfire. A 271-piece, 41mm limited edition in bronze. This is the MJ271 model that is named after the call sign of the silver Spitfire that IWC sponsored for a circumnavigation of the world. It was the first circumnavigation of the world by a supermarine Spitfire. This watch is named in its honor. This model, 271 pieces, coming out in the year 2019. It has a lovely military olive green dial, instrument style dial. It's actually based on the Pilot's Watch UTC that came out in 1998. Now it's a bigger version of that with a more advanced movement, but it's the same basic style and dial layout. You have a 24-hour format second time zone up at 12 o'clock, and then you have local hands, rose gold plated, that can be set easily and independently. The watch features a screw-down crown and a soft iron inner cage to give it anti-magnetic resistance. There is patina on this case. Make no mistake, if you wish, this can be reverted just by cleaning the case with a solvent during service. This is not something that can be rubbed off or removed by soap and water, but IWC has a proprietary process for removing the patina without diminishing the metal, should you choose to do so during service. This is by no means permanent, just gives the watch a little bit of character in the meantime. Taking a look at the reverse side, you can see the Supermarine Spitfire aircraft with its elliptical wings, the hero of the Battle of Britain, and of course 6-bar with a screw-down crown and 60-meter water resistance. Not only is this an anti-magnetic watch, but it is also a surface swimmable watch. The caliber inside, 82710, automatic winding. It is a 60-hour power reserve, and then you can see the watch has a lovely aviator-style calfskin strap in a sort of reddish brown. A wonderful piece to wear, and at 41mm is probably an ideal size for a pilot's watch. Big enough to be visible, but not big pilot big. That is to say, not huge. You can see on my wrist it's a good fit. Let's take a look at it in the dark. And there you are. You can see the four corners, plenty of lume, the iconic index at 12, and broadsword style hands. Jumping back to the land of the living, as I like to say. We're going to take a look at the IWC Portuguese Torbjorn Mystère, reference 5044, 44.2 millimeters in rose gold. As you can see, it is a automatic winding, 7-day power reserve with a power reserve indicator, a flying tourbillon, and then we have a retrograde style date, and the date does include a quick set. So we have lovely rose gold applique indices and numerals, rose gold leaf style hands, a matte or satin finish opaline silver dial, and then a rose gold frame over the tourbillon, which, as with the Moser, is a flying tourbillon with no upper bridge to block your enjoyment of the works below. It is a 1-minute tourbillon, so it effectively acts as the seconds indicator for the dial. Turn the watch over and you can see the movement is frankly enormous. It has a full ceramic Peloton winding system, which means, or I should say it has full ceramic pawls that reduces the dirt on the movement issue that would have been a problem on original versions of the 5000 series caliber. This version, the 51900, does not have that problem because of the use of the ceramic pawls. Solid gold medallion inside the winding rotor, enormous span. The movement is over 37 millimeters in diameter, meaning the caliber here is one of the largest automatic movements in the world, bigger by itself than an entire Rolex Datejust. Taking a look at the side, not just a limited edition launched in 2010, it is also an individually numbered edition. Most IWC limited edition watches simply say 1 out of 500, for example. This one is 70, individually numbered, making it a little bit more special even than a standard IWC limited series watch. It's big, but I can wear it. I would recommend you wear it on a wrist of at least 15 centimeters circumference, but it does have nicely curved lugs, so the fit is good and the stance is secure. Full deploying clasp, rose gold to prevent accidental droppage of the watch. This is a rich and iconic IWC model. If you want a Portuguese, but you want your high horology, not just luxury horology, this is a great way to go. From one tourbillon to another, let's talk about a model launched at Baselworld 2014, 44 millimeters, but only 11.1 millimeters thick. This is the Arnold and Son TES Tourbillon Escapement Sapphire Bridge. So Arnold and Son out of La Chaux-de-Fonds is the brand associated with the manufacturer La Joux-Perret. In an annual production, you will see all of 700 watches made by Arnold and Son and about 70 under their Angelus sub-brand. So you're talking less than 800 watches of all kind made by Arnold and Angelus. This watch is one of 28 made in 2014 in rose gold. You could see German silver is used for the base plate, which is then cut with a rose lathe to create that lovely guilloche pattern. We have black polishing across the tourbillon half bridge as well as the tourbillon carriage itself. It is a 1-minute tourbillon. All of this manual wind with the action on the dial side, so you need not rotate it. You can enjoy this watch without looking at the case back and removing the watch from your wrist. Note the use of an exceptionally large mainspring, which gives the watch an 80-hour power reserve in spite of the energy-intensive tourbillon complication. You can also see the gold-coated individual bridges starting at the mainspring. You can see we have a train that works its way down on cantilevered finger bridges to create a wonderful impression of depth worthy of Grubel Forsey. You have bridges over the winding works and the barrel, and then you can see that there's an elaborate click and click spring structure inspired by pocket watches that keeps the barrel from moving backwards. The beveling on the edge of the bridges is outstanding, and this is true high horology finish. From the engine turning on the base plate to the black polishing and slotting of the screws to the beveling of the bridges and the satination of their tops, truly impressive stuff. And you can see on the reverse side, the keyless works in steel has been entirely hand finished with satination on its tops and mirrored beveling all over its edges. And you can see that the same degree of treatment, including the guilloche, has been rendered on the reverse side. Let's throw this watch on my wrist and you get a sense of how it wears. Though it's a large watch, the shape of Arnold and Son cases ensures that they wear easily, comfortably, and this one wears flat. As you can see, it sits only about 11 millimeters above my wrist, so I could absolutely wear this watch with the tightest of dress sleeves. With half-frosted broadsword style hands, it's also an easy watch to read, which is not always the case with open dial watches. Now this here is my favorite Arnold and Son watch, also launched in 2014. This is the 44mm stainless steel CTB chronograph, and it was a world premiere featuring coaxial hands for time as well as chronograph. So the chronograph seconds hand, as you can see, is a sweep seconds. jumping 8 times per second. It is an 8 beat per second. You can also see that there is a deadbeat constant seconds hand that relates to the time of day. So these two things move at the same speed, but as you can see, they also move at a different rate. That pirouette, that pursuit runs around as long as the chronograph is running, and it is absolutely spectacular to see. Now, take a quick look at the dial. Several different metallic finishes on the registers themselves, the frosted finish of the dial base, and then the silver satin of the seconds track outboard. This is a gorgeous watch with blued hands, a handsome 44mm hand-polished steel case. You can see that the lug construction here is welded on. This is old school case construction, labor intensive, very expensive. And if you want a watch that's handmade outside and in, the CTB is a great way to do it. Now, I want to make clear, the watch is not a regulator because we do have the hours and minutes up at 12 o'clock. But if you take a quick look, you can see that it has a 60-minute chronograph register, a feature that frankly should be universal on chronographs, as 30 minutes is just not enough. So this is quite practical. Flip it all over. You can see the caliber 7103 with high horology finish. My favorite part, the mirrored bevels, which are a mile wide. You do not need a loop to appreciate how broad, rounded, and hand-finished that anglage is. You can also see that there is Côte de Soleil radiating out from the center of the movement, so a sunburst rather than conventional striped Côte de Genève. Black polished screws. The screws have slots that have been chamfered, circumference that have been chamfered, and then we have engine turning on the base plate and satination on the wheels. You can also see that this is a column wheel chronograph, and the column wheel feel is such that I can pronounce it best in the business, equal to the absolute finest, which would be the A Lungo und Sonne datograph. It is that good. And again, this company making 700 watches a year, Longa making over 5,000. Now, it's a big watch, but at 49mm from lug to lug, I would have no trouble wearing this. It's comfortable, it sits securely, it looks proportional, and the further away I get from the camera, the better it looks, really. And this is how it looks in person. A fantastic watch, and probably the coolest chronograph you can buy that's not the GirardPerregaux Duomet. I consider this to be that impressive. Automatic winding, 45 to 50 hour power reserve. Now, when we speak of chronographs, Patek Philippe does some of the finest, and the 5170 represents perhaps the best overall blend of size, style, and technical proficiency. This is a watch, 39.4mm in white gold, that was modified as you see it right here for the 2015 model year, which means you combine the white gold case with the matte black dial with the white gold polished Breguet Arabic numerals. The original 5170 came out in 2010, and it was super formal. Silver satin dial, yellow gold case, stick indices and Roman numerals. This is much more versatile, and in my opinion, far more youthful and contemporary. Now, the case itself is slim, and the movement is gorgeous. Caliber 29, 535, and you can see that everything is up to the standard you would expect from the very height of high horology. You can see that it is a gorgeous column wheel lateral clutch chronograph, and one of the features I like best here is the black polished column wheel itself. Now, you can see in action the levers and the horns and the lateral clutch of the chronograph. You should take note that at Patek Philippe, higher level watchmakers work on the lateral clutches compared to the vertical clutches. So whereas the vertical clutch is considered to be more efficient, the lateral clutch is considered to be more beautiful, more premium, more expensive, and harder to work on. As a result, you see it only on the brand's absolute premier chronographs. Now, the column wheel has been capped and black polished, the idea being that is a Geneva standard, long running. The idea behind the original capping of column wheels not being to make them beautiful, but to prevent the horns of the clutch and the levers from popping out of the crenellated towers in the case of shock. Now, the watch does have a feature that is being phased in on most modern manufactured Patek movements, hacking or stop seconds. It's a 4 Hz beat rate. It's bigger and better fills the case back than the previous Lemania-based caliber, and it features an instantaneous jumping minutes register. It also features a 65-hour power reserve, 6-position adjustment, and a handmade Breguet over coil hairspring. You can see the mirrored beveling on the edge, not just of the bridges, but also of the steel chronograph components. The Cote de Genève across the bridges, satination across the top of the chronograph components, steel screws, black polished, and white gold numerals to match on the dial side. Full matching white gold clasp, throw it on the wrist, gorgeous. Relatively compact at only about 47 millimeters across the wrist. I do consider it to be a unisex option, and this is quite possibly the perfect dress chronograph. This has to be the most animated watch ever created. 46 millimeters in titanium. This is the GirardPerregaux Constant Escapement LM. The 48 millimeter original, which is mechanically identical but 2 millimeters larger, won the GPHG Aiguille d'Or back in 2013 as the best watch of the year at the Oscars of watchmaking. Why? Well, you can see right here. The escapement, which is a rather convoluted system based on a combination of materials and elastic resistance. It's powered by caliber 9100 with 2 enormous mainspring barrels. You can see the GirardPerregaux bridge motif taken from the 3 golden bridges tourbillon on the reverse side. In fact, this watch has been part of the bridges family at GP. You could see sharp exterior angles, mirrored beveling, a wonderful satination or opaline finishing of the bridges, but all of that is subsidiary to the main event. How does this system work? Well, Nicolas Dehaene, who created the system, originally prototyped it for Rolex during the late 90s. They never finished their patent on the mechanism. He left to GirardPerregaux, and with the introduction of silicon components, he was able to finally execute his concept. What's going on here is you have the 2 barrels, which you can see are also visible on the dial side, and they are channeling their energy through these 2 wheels, and you can see the wheels have a little blocker mechanism between them that alternates which one is moving. So alternately, they trip a small silicon hairspring. It's a linear hairspring, and it is a fraction the thickness of a human hair. But this entire structure in iridescent purple is one monoblock of silicon. The wheel starts pushing the band of silicon until it snaps in the other direction. It is the energizing of the silicon and the subsequent snap, not the motion of the wheel, but the snap of the silicon, that impulses the balance. As a result, these wheels never directly impulse the balance because it takes the same energy to snap the silicon on each side each time. It has a constant force escapement. A little bit like a remontoir d'égalité, it ensures that no matter how wound or discharged the barrels, the escapement always receives the same amount of force. As a result, amplitude is maintained and the watch can be adjusted very precisely. One of the most technically ambitious and visually spectacular watches ever created. It is a watch that is big and bold, but light and comfortable on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. I do think aesthetically it pays to have a wrist of 17 centimeters circumference or more, but if your wrist is my size, you're going to wear this one quite well. It's got a 6-day power reserve. It's got a power reserve indicator on the dial side. Again, 16 centimeter circumference wrist like mine, it's going to sit comfortably. It's just going to look a little bit jumbo. And in case you're wondering, in titanium, it's hypoallergenic. Grade 5 tie is more scratch resistant than steel, and yes, the dial is loomed. And we finish up with an absolute grail watch, launched in 2019 in fired titanium. This is the De Bethune DB28 yellow tones. They have fired titanium and turned it blue. Another patented process that they created allows them to fire titanium and turn it yellow. This is not a gold watch. It is 42.7 millimeters in diameter and under 12 millimeters thick. It is a moon phase that has 1/2 fired yellow, 1/2 white palladium, and it has a 1,000-year adjustment interval. It has spring-loaded floating lugs, and remember, the original DB28 back in 2011 won the GPHG Aiguille d'Or, the best watch of the year, again, like the GP at the Oscars of watchmaking. Now, taking a look at the dial, you can see all of the fun is on the dial side. The movement has patented twin self-adjusting barrels, triple parachute shock protection, so you have shock protection here at the center and at the edge, 3 shock protection springs, so twin self-adjusting barrels patented. Fired yellow titanium process, patented. Floating lugs, patented. Spherical 1,000-year moon face, patented. Triple parachute shock protection, patented. A bi-element flat hairspring shaped by hand that beats concentrically like an overcoil, patented. And a titanium blued balance wheel with white gold masses, patented. Silicon escape wheel for minimal friction and longer power reserve, patented. Manual wind, 6-day power reserve with bullhead winding, patented. And on the reverse side, you can see there is an elaborated power reserve, all of the finishing very traditional. And when you look at the dial side of the watch, you can really see that in detail, as we have abrasive wheel Côte de Béthune, which is basically like Côte de Genève, but the wheel is reversed on each side. So on each side, you can see the darker side of the stripe faces outward. Normally, it would just be the darker side pointing in one direction. Because the bridge is made in two parts with the wheel reversed, the darker stripe always points outward. That is the darker side of the gradient. You can see at center, the mounting for the triple parachute has also been fired yellow and black polished. We have mirrored anglage of the highest grade on the edge of the bridges, and then satination on the barrels as well as the drivetrain. In terms of high horology, this is as good as it gets. An ergonomic dream, it is surprisingly slim. This is a brand that's going places, and it's also extremely exclusive, as only 150 pieces are made per year, and fewer than 3,000 de Béthune timepieces have been made since the brand's founding in 2002. This is one of the most celebrated and most distinctive, spectacular anywhere, in any light, in any company. Even a Grubel Forsey will struggle to keep up with the finish, the innovation, and the sheer wrist presence of this horological titan from La Berson. If you love this watch, reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.